Hello and welcome to Westferry Times. Thank you for watching. I'm Emily, and you've tuned in for another deep dive. Today, we're focusing on some pretty significant developments here in the UK, specifically the new measures being rolled out to counter hostile state threats. This all comes, of course, right after those recent charges against 3 Iranian nationals for espionage. And to help us really, understand the significance of all this, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. James Thompson. He's a leading national security analyst, brings deep expertise in counterintelligence. Welcome to the deep dive.
Thank you, Emily. It's good to be here. Definitely an important topic to unpack.
Absolutely. So maybe let's just dive right in, the core of it, these espionage charges. 3 Iranian nationals. Could you give us the sort of the clear picture? What exactly are they accused of?
Certainly. So on May 17th this year, 3 individuals, Mustafa Sepaven, Farhad Javadi Manesh, and Shapur Khalihali Khani Nouri, they were formally charged.
Okay.
And this was under the National Security Act 2023. The new act, yes. The main accusation is that they were, well, engaging in conduct likely to assist a foreign intelligence service, specifically Iran's.
And how are they supposedly doing that?
The specifics point towards surveillance and reconnaissance activities,
Right.
targeting journalists who work for Iran International.
Ah, the London-based channel,
Yeah,
known for being critical of Tehran.
precisely. So that's the core allegation.
And what about the individuals themselves? What do we know?
Well, the information suggests they all entered the UK illegally,
Okay.
at different times, actually,
Yeah.
between 2016 and 2022. Following an investigation, they were arrested back on May 3rd, 2025, and they've been in custody since then.
And you mentioned the National Security Act 2023. Why is that detail so significant here?
It's significant because, well, it's the first time Iranian nationals have actually been charged under this specific act.
So a new legal tool being put to use.
Exactly. And the act itself is relatively new legislation.
Okay, let's talk about that act then. The National Security Act 2023. We hear the name, but, for those of us not buried in legal texts, can you sort of break down its main purpose? Why is it such a key piece right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Think of it as a major update, a modernization, if you like,
Okay.
to the UK's toolkit for dealing with modern threats. Things like spying, sabotage,
Foreign interference,
foreign interference, exactly. It essentially replaces the older Official Secrets Acts.
which presumably weren't quite fit for purpose anymore.
Well, that was the argument. Some felt they weren't really designed for the complex challenges we see today. Digital espionage, state-backed disinformation, that kind of thing.
Right.
So the new act brings in a range of new offenses, new powers.
All intended to be more effective against these modern threats.
That's the goal, yes,
Yeah.
to strengthen the UK's defenses.
And building on this, we then had the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, announcing plans for, well, even newer legislation, targeting state-backed groups specifically. What's the thinking there? What's driving that?
That's really about plugging perceived gaps in the current laws.
Gaps.
Yes, gaps when it comes to threats that are, orchestrated or actively supported by foreign states themselves. The Home Secretary mentioned the Terrorism Act 2000. Important, yes, but
But maybe not the right fit for state actors?
not always the right tool, exactly. Particularly for activities that might fall short of, traditional terrorism, but are still hostile state actions. So the proposal is to create new powers to officially prescribe certain groups.
Prescribe, like ban them.
Essentially, yes, ban them. Groups like, for example, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, that's often cited.
Okay, so if a group like the IRGC were prescribed, what difference would that make on the ground? What could the authorities actually do?
It would be quite significant. Prescription basically lets the UK treat that state-backed group much like it treats currently prescribed terrorist organizations.
So similar powers.
Very similar powers. It could mean making it a criminal offense to support the group in any way.
Financially, ideologically.
Any support. It would likely give law enforcement greater powers to investigate, to prosecute individuals suspected of involvement. You might see measures like confiscating passports of suspected agents.
Wow.
And potentially, in certain specific circumstances, even allowing stop and search powers without needing reasonable suspicion first.
So a pretty major strengthening of state power against these groups.
It represents a significant step up in the government's ability to counter these specific kinds of state-sponsored threats, yes.
Now, this hasn't just been legal maneuvers, has it? We've seen diplomatic fallout, too, both the UK and Iran summoning ambassadors. What does that tell us, that back and forth?
Well, summoning an ambassador is, a standard diplomatic signal. It shows Serious displeasure, serious concern.
Formal complaint, basically.
Exactly. And the fact that both countries did it really highlights the heightened tensions, how seriously each side is taking this.
So for the UK,
For the UK, summoning Iran's representative was a clear message. National security is top priority, and they intend to hold Iran accountable for these alleged actions.
and Iran's response.
Their reciprocal action, summoning a British diplomat, protesting the detention. They called it illegal, politically motivated. There's strong objection, obviously. And it points to, well, a further worsening of what was already a pretty difficult diplomatic relationship.
Amidst all this, Jonathan Hall, KC, he's the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation. He even floated the idea of anti-subversion laws. What's that about? What's the thinking there?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Mr. Hall is raising concerns about how some hostile states are increasingly trying to exploit the UK's openness.
Exploit our openness. How?
To undermine democratic values, sow discord, erode trust in institutions. He's talking about a return of subversion, using tactics like sophisticated disinformation campaigns, ideological infiltration, sort of subtle influence operations.
Right, not bombs or spies in the traditional sense, but undermining from within.
Precisely. And his argument, essentially, is that our current methods may be relying too much on, say, social media platforms to moderate content.
It isn't enough.
Isn't sufficient to counter these coordinated, often covert, state-backed campaigns.
But anti-subversion laws, that sounds tricky. Freedom of speech issues.
Absolutely. He acknowledges that. Defining subversion legally, enforcing such laws without chilling legitimate dissent or free expression, it's incredibly challenging.
It's a difficult balance.
Very. But he's suggesting a stronger legal framework might ultimately be necessary to protect the foundations of our democracy. It's a serious debate to be had.
Okay. Then there's this other measure. An enhanced tier for the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, specifically targeting the entire Iranian state. How's that supposed to work?
Right. This enhanced tier is set to come into effect on July 1st.
Soon, then.
Very soon. It represents a more sort of focused and robust way to monitor activities happening here in the UK on behalf of the Iranian government. Basically, any individual, any organization acting under the direction of the Iranian state.
They'll have to register.
They will be legally required to register their activities, yes.
And the goal is?
Transparency, primarily. To know who is acting for foreign powers within the UK and what exactly they're doing.
A bit like lobbying registers, but for foreign states.
That's a decent analogy,
Yeah.
but specifically focused on foreign government direction. It's about increasing accountability.
Got it. And beyond laws and diplomacy, there seems to be a focus on disrupting the kind of the operational networks. The Foxtrot network was mentioned as an example. What's that about?
Yeah, focusing on these networks is crucial because hostile states often rely on them.
For what? Logistics, money?
Exactly. Logistics, moving funds, acting as intermediaries, providing cover, all sorts of operational support.
Yeah.
So by hitting these networks with sanctions, like they did with this Foxtrot network.
You disrupt their ability to operate here.
Precisely. You make it harder, more costly, riskier for the hostile state to carry out its activities in the UK.
And international cooperation is key there too, presumably.
Absolutely. The UK mentioned plans to convene meetings with international partners to discuss coordinated action. These threats are often transnational, so united response is, well, much more effective. It's about challenging these Iranian transnational threats collectively.
And finally, looking inwards.
Yes.
Strengthening UK border security itself. What's happening there?
There's definitely a recognition that borders can be a point of vulnerability.
Exploited by?
Exploited not just by organized crime, which we hear a lot about, but also by individuals linked to hostile states or extremists trying to enter the country.
Right.
So as part of this wider push, the government is introducing new counterterrorism powers specifically at the border.
To enhance screening.
Essentially, yes. To enhance the ability to identify and, crucially, prevent individuals who might pose a national security threat from entering the UK in the first place.
Okay. So all these different threads, legislation, diplomacy, sanctions, borders, it feels like it's building towards something bigger. The Prime Minister committed to a new national security strategy.
Yes, that's right. And a new strategy like that is meant to provide the overarching framework.
The big picture.
The big picture, exactly. Yeah. How the UK plans to deal with this, well, increasingly complex and evolving threat landscape. Given everything we've discussed, you'd expect it to cover how not just government, but also, businesses, community,
Society as a whole.
how society as a whole needs to adapt and respond. A key focus will almost certainly be on countering these hybrid threats.
That blend of tactics.
Yeah.
Cyber, disinformation, espionage.
Exactly. That blend of traditional spying, cyber attacks, influence operations, economic pressure, all those non-military tools. It's about developing a more sort of comprehensive, integrated approach for a world where threats aren't always clear-cut military ones.
Well, this has been incredibly illuminating. Thank you so much for walking us through all these quite complex developments.
My pleasure. It's, as I said, a vital conversation. Lots happening.
It certainly is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's pretty clear the UK is taking, well, significant steps. New laws, diplomatic pressure, targeting networks, focusing on defenses. A real shift seems underway.
Yeah, what's really striking is how these different pieces are meant to fit together. You've got the laws aiming to deter,
Race.
the diplomacy signaling resolve, the operational measures trying to disrupt. It's all intended to build a more kind of resilient national security posture overall.
Which does raise a key question for you listening.
Indeed. How effectively can all these different strands actually be coordinated? How well can they be implemented on the ground to genuinely make the UK safer?
That is the crucial question, isn't it? And it leads nicely into our final thought for you today. As the UK implements these measures, these necessary steps perhaps, to counter evolving threats, what are the longer-term implications? That balance between national security and, well, the fundamental values of an open, democratic society. Where does that line get drawn?
It's a perennial challenge, isn't it? Ensuring security measures are robust but also proportionate, safeguarding freedoms, upholding democratic principles. Not always easy.
Not easy at all. A discussion that will definitely continue. Well, that is all the time we have for this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us here on Westferry Times. Please like, and share this video. And do subscribe to our channel, Westferry Times, for more analysis like this. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.